My name is Celia Voss. I am 36 years old, a senior compliance officer at a financial regulatory bureau in Washington, D.C. 4 weeks ago, I told my husband I was pregnant. He did not speak. He nodded once, cleared his plate, and left the room. By morning, his access to our joint accounts had changed. The calendar password was reset, and my name was missing from the summer travel booking he had made just days earlier. There was no argument, no refusal, just absence, sudden, total, and strategic. That was how I learned that for him, my pregnancy was not a beginning. It was an exit plan, I told him in the kitchen. Standing across from the dishwasher I had just unloaded, placing a glass upside down in the cabinet we both used without thinking, he looked at me for less than a second, then reached for the water filter, filled his glass, and walked to the hallway without comment. The refrigerator clicked off just after the door closed. I stood still. The glass I had been holding never made it to the shelf. That night, he did not come to bed. The next morning, his schedule was cleared, but he was already gone. A notification on my phone said our family calendar had been archived. When I logged in, it asked for a new authentication method. I requested access. It was denied. On the bathroom sink, he had left his shaving kit behind, but taken the cologne I had bought him 2 years earlier anniversary gift. Wrapped in cream linen, unopened until that morning. No note, no message. Just absences. His side of the closet thinned. Charger gone from the wall, toothbrush still damp. I called once. Let it ring until voicemail. No return call. At work, I processed the audit results from a bank in Delaware, flagged to irregular holdings, issued a memo. I wore the same coat I had worn the day I passed the bar. At lunch, I sat with my back to the window. That night, I found a new login screen on our joint investment portal. His initials now preceded the account name. The balance was lower. Not depleted, but lower. No transfers visible. Just missing. It was a Thursday. He came home briefly to retrieve his tennis bag. I said nothing. He did not look in my direction. When he opened the hall closet, one of the folded onesies slid from the top shelf. He stepped over it. I picked it up after he left. The tag was still on. Neutral colors. We had not known the gender. I had imagined a quiet announcement at dinner. Something subtle, something private. Instead, it had landed like a warning shot. 2 weeks earlier, he had scheduled a landscaping consultation for the back patio and asked me to cancel my prenatal appointment to meet them. I had agreed without resistance. We were not fighting. We had not fought. He told people we had excellent compatibility. That was his phrase. When we met, he told me I had a regulatory mind and a gallery eye. I believed he saw both. We built from parallel ladders carefully. I rose through compliance law while he joined a risk arbitrage firm. Our circles adjacent but clean. He used to text me links to real estate listings in counties with good school boards. Once he said I would be a terrifyingly good mother. I said I did not need to be terrifying, just competent. He had smiled. Now, the smile had been replaced by silence, a clean, deliberate removal of intention. Our friends were quiet too. One of them messaged me to confirm our RSVP for a dinner I had never heard about. Another asked if I was excited for Italy, mentioned he had been talking about it for months. I searched my inbox. No ticket, no itinerary. I remembered that last month he had asked if I would be able to travel in June. I had said it depended. I had been referring to the baby. He had nodded, then changed the subject. Now I understood. He had never added me to the booking. He had never intended to. He had already built a plan that excluded me before I knew I needed to be included. I walked through our apartment room by room, taking note not of what was gone, but of what had never been moved. The framed ultrasound on the sideboard, unopened mail addressed to both of us, a baby name book I had dog-eared weeks ago, his bookmarks, untouched. There was no confrontation, no accusation, just a realignment of presence. He was not gone in the dramatic sense. He was simply no longer inside the frame. I moved nothing. I tracked everything. My therapist once told me that betrayal is not about what is taken, but about the structure that collapses when the foundation was never shared. At the time, I disagreed. Now I understood. He had never let me hold half of it. He had let me decorate a scaffolding. And once the news was spoken, just a few words across a quiet kitchen, he began removing weight with the precision of someone who had already planned for the exit. There was no shouting. He had done nothing loud, only subtraction. And I did not stop him. Not yet. Because the quiet I was learning revealed more than the noise ever had. It began with the flight confirmation email. He had left the browser window open on his office laptop hand, oversight I would later learn was not characteristic, but calculated. The destination was listed as Zurich. The sender was a boutique financial group with no public website and a domain. That traced back to the Isle of Man. The email thread was brief, professional, and time-stamped at 3:17 a.m. a full 4 hours after he had returned from a networking dinner and slipped into bed without touching me. I did not ask about it, I did not forward it. I memorized the time, the name of the contact, and the embedded client code in the footer. That same morning, I ran a keyword scan on our home desktop as preferred archive device. Always offline. Red Branch Holdings, Veyton Legal, Zerker. The names were unfamiliar, but the pattern was not. I found PDF correspondence between him and an entity listed as FW Bomber Asset Structuring, early dispersals, discretionary clauses. In one folder labeled simply options, there were 3 signed retainer agreements, each bearing his signature, each timestamped within a week of the day I had told him I was pregnant. One included the phrase early extraction contingency. Another listed a property in Oslo. He had not booked a summer escape. He had booked an exit route. I moved with restraint, deleting nothing, altering nothing, only printing what was necessary and photographing what could vanish. My training in compliance regulation had taught me the difference between red flags and legal smoke. What I was seeing was not disloyalty, it was orchestration. The betrayal was not emotionally, was fiduciary. The house had shifted its rhythm. His toothbrush moved from the left to the right drawer. The charger he once shared with me was suddenly replaced with one of a different model. Our shared coat closet now held only my garments, as if the winter that would follow belonged only to me. He began taking calls from the patio, even in rain. The screen door would close softly, always behind him. His late meetings aligned, too precisely with empty credit card swipes. Across airport lounges and hotels with corporate names that bore no direct connection to his work, I began tracking through public tools pacer filings, travel itineraries, offshore registry indexes. What I uncovered was not merely MIT, was the infrastructure of someone preparing to separate his life into parts he could carry without legal claim. One folder titled Contingencies contained an unsigned prenuptial addendum, clearly backdated. It referenced clauses we had never discussed and assets we had never divided. There were passwords embedded in notes to self, and aliases for 3 burner phone numbers stored under medical vendor names. The pattern was not paranoia, was survival instinct refined into legal foresight. I studied every item with detachment, as if auditing a client, not a husband. Pain had become irrelevant. What mattered was procedural logic. What struck me hardest was what was missing. Not a single document mentioned me by name, not in asset transfers, not in contingency filings, not in future travel or inheritance structuring. I had been erased preemptively. He was not reacting. He was executing. On the surface, his demeanor remained unchanged, cordial, distracted, efficient. He kissed my cheek before leaving, texted once a day, returned home with mild stories about new investors or international partnerships. His tone was practiced neutrality, but in that neutrality was his tactic, plausible deniability rendered in polite detachment. I countered by logging timestamps, departure, entry, email drafts, GPS pings synced to our car's onboard diagnostics. At the firm, I applied for a temporary internal review, posting avert, unannounced. It gave me lawful access to shell movements, client behavior patterns, and most critically, patterns of account distancing, exactly the sort of techniques he was using. Drawn from case precedent, I sent nothing to my personal account. I used encrypted vaults, 2 offline drives, and cloud syncs hidden within a decoy family email labeled archives for Aunt D. The systemic betrayal became visible in fragments. Our second mortgage had been refinanced under a trust I had never seen, Harlan Voss Memorial Holdings, named after his father, long dead and long controlling. The lawyer listed was an old family contact of his, formerly disbarred, now reinstated quietly through a foreign board. He had moved to investment properties into the trust name, effectively walling them off from marital reach. When I traced the signature trail, I found that one of them had used my digital initials as Esli scraped from our prior joint filings, forged possibly, or simply repurposed. Either way, it was not careless, it was calibrated. Through a minor clerical reference, I located a life insurance beneficiary update, dated 2 weeks after I revealed my pregnancy. The beneficiary had changed from spouse to private entity ref. 4,431. I knew what that meant. He was protecting something else or someone, and the timing of it aligned too cleanly with the woman from his firm he had once casually referred to as brilliant, but volatile. I remembered her dark-rimmed glasses, long fingers, and the kind of smile that stops just short of sincerity. I remembered how she looked at him once, like someone who had been promised something and had not yet received it. The next day, I searched his calendar history. Her initials were in 3 entries. The first dated 6 months back. The last 2 weeks before our last ultrasound still, I said nothing. I collected everything, each signed clause, each offshore transfer, each hotel booking and time-stamped receipt. I learned how he buried information under innocent file names, budget projections, Q3 notes, vet invoice. I matched his timelines against his lies, and they aligned perfectly. That was the mark of a man who had rehearsed this. This was not about a mistake or a drifting marriage. This was a strategic divestment cold, structured and aimed at leaving me without recourse. But that was where his plan cracked. He had not accounted for who I was before him, before us. He had not accounted for what discipline looks like in a woman who has nothing left to fear. The further I looked, the less I mourned. My grief had calcified into logic. My silence was not compliance, it was accumulation. I was not devastated. I was preparing. There were no tears. Only timestamps. The conference room was beige, functional, and windowless. I selected it deliberately neutral territory. Corporate lighting, nothing personal. He arrived 4 minutes late, slightly flushed, dressed in business casual that feigned composure. He did not ask why we were meeting, he knew. I had arranged the documents in 2 neat stacks on the table. One labeled disclosure, the other terms. I did not speak first. Instead, I opened the leather folder that held the certified copies and rotated it toward him slowly, as if presenting an audit, not a confrontation. The first document was a notarized timeline containing every offshore transfer, every alias used, every discrepancy in marital asset filings. The second was a summary of digital correspondence I had compiled across 3 devices, 2 burner numbers, and an encrypted cloud folder tied to his Zurich contact. The third was a signed affidavit from a compliance officer at my firm, verifying the trust laundering routes he had used, legal, but now illuminated. I watched his face tighten, not with guilt, but with calculation. He scanned the pages like a man assessing risk, not remorse. I did not interrupt. His silence for once was not a tactic. It was a cage. When he reached for the terms folder, I spoke only one sentence. This is not punishment. That sentence hung in the air like a verdict. Inside the folder was the negotiated settlement, drafted with precision, pre-cleared by 2 legal teams. He would return partial marital funds through escrow, release his claim to the primary property, and sign a non-disclosure agreement that barred him from contesting narrative or defaming character. He would make no claim to the child. He would not appear at the birth. In return, I would file no criminal or civil complaints. I would not contest the offshore accounts, the forged digital initials, or the fraudulent insurance changes. I would disappear from his future as efficiently as he had erased me from his past. He looked up at me then, not with apology, but with the stunned recognition that I had won, quietly, entirely, and without giving him anything to react to. He asked if he could have time to review. I said the documents were final. He asked if I wanted anything else. I said I already had everything I needed. Then I handed him a single object, my wedding ring, placed inside the cap of a pen he had once given me, the one engraved with my maiden initials. He stared at it for a second too long, then nodded. No theatrics, just math. When I stood to leave, I left the pen on the table, still uncapped. That was the only symbol I allowed myself. Not grief, not anger, just the clean subtraction of what no longer belonged to me. I did not look back. As I stepped out into the corridor, the lights flickered briefly overhead in ordinary malfunction, but it felt like something more. The flicker of a chapter closing. Cleanly, without spectacle, there would be no victory lap. Only vacancy, and a woman who now understood that silence was the purest form of power. Her name is Elise Ward. She moves through rooms like someone who has learned never to waste motion or explanation. Her stillness is not passivity, is architecture, designed to deflect chaos and absorb betrayal without collapse. Before her intelligence took the form of discretion, now it sharpens into scrutiny. The fracture did not make her louder. It made her surgical. Her world was not invaded from the outside. It was poisoned from within. And because of that, trust has become her most violent absence. Elise does not believe in revenge. She believes in formal correction. She never starts the fire, but she names the source, traces the damage, and seals the exits. Every conversation is edited before spoken. Every silence is intentional. Her core rule remains untouched. Control is not dominance. It is refusal. She does not explain, not because she cannot, but because it costs more than it pays. His name is Marcus Hale. We do not see him directly. We see the gaps he creates. In the beginning, he appears polished, predictable, generous in gesture until those gestures repeat in odd rhythms. A dinner he never remembers arranging. A payment he cannot account for. A sentence that changes meaning when read aloud. Through Elise's eyes, he becomes legible only when his patterns contradict his posture. His motives are not cartoonish. They are layered, functional, strategic. There is no smoking gun, no violent rupture, just erosion. Habitual cruelty disguised As logistical neglect, Marcus is not interested in hurting her. He is interested in surviving himself, and if that means rewriting her place in his narrative, he does it with the ease of someone used to being the sole author. Redemption is irrelevant. His arc is not incomplete, it is irrelevant. This is not his story. The mirror is held up by Lena Ward, younger sister, raised in the same house but cut from different cloth, where Elise internalizes Lena probes, where Elise holds her silence like a blade. Lena uses hers to dig. Lena is not naive-ish. She just refuses to live in suspicion. She challenges Elise not through emotion but through calibration. What if you are wrong? It is not doubt, it is discipline. Her role is not to comfort, but to keep Elise from becoming indistinguishable from the people she dissects. Then there is Charles Nugent, attorney, former corporate counsel turned ethical minimalist. He does not ask Elise if she is sure. He makes sure she is prepared. His presence recalibrates the room. He has no allegiance to outcome, only to truth, strategy, and the integrity of the paper trail. And finally, Anya, Malika, colleague Elise once mentored, a quiet observer, fluent in restraint. She sees Elise before Elise realizes she is being seen. Her presence is not loud, but it is loyal. These foils are not dramatic. They are disciplined. They do not rescue. They do not narrate. They reflect Elise's own code. In shadow and contrast, and in doing so, remind us that survival is not isolation. It is architecture.